Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Tompsett along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
It's wild, man. It's wild, man. Sorry to our listeners that are normally here 9 o'clock on Wednesday nights here, 9 Eastern. My wife is traveling, and so I got these two little kids by myself trying to do bedtime, 1 versus 2. It does not always go to plan, so we had pushed back, hoping to go to plan. And honestly, I pretty much went right up to the wire here tonight, Craig. And, I'm actually proud of myself that I got it done. A kid may bust through the door at any point with a runny nose or something like that.
We make no promises.
We make no promises, but they're cute at least. So if they interrupt us, at least they're cute kids. But I'm happy to be here talking football with you, man. It's much needed distraction from all the we talked all about the craziness last week. We had more terrible craziness this week. I need this break to talk about some football to stay distracted.
Yeah, seriously, I need this in my life. I have a lot of my sister and a lot of my family are teachers and everything like that. And I need this. Like I need something to take my mind away and unfortunately as soon as
what better thing to talk about than Josh Allen?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So before we get into tonight's show, tonight we are kicking off our position preview series that we're doing through the rest of the offseason. But we actually had a little bit of legitimate news here today. So one of the pieces that's come up the last 2 years, especially during the pandemic stretch, the NFL changed their practice squad rules. They went through some different pieces on how they would allow the number of players, which expanded up to 16. They did the unlimited number of, they changed into injured reserve, where now there was a return from injured reserve, and they made it that there was unlimited players that could return instead of just the 3. So they went through, and that was actually only for 2 years. So that was only set up for 2020 and 2021. So if they needed to do that, long term, it would actually have to be a formal addendum to the CBA. Well, today they did that. They formally amended the CBA and created a couple additions. Most of the things like we knew were put into place. So we still have 16 practice squad players, which is great. They also did up to 6 veteran players, which is really nice. That means virtually anyone who's on the borderline of getting cut but has more than 4 vested seasons. So for the Bills, you're talking if they were to cut a Jake Kumro or a Duke Johnson or I won't say his name, but the offensive lineman that always gets picked up on practice squad. Those kind of players, they can do up to 6 of those, which is nice.
Matt Barkley
is a perfect addition, perfect add to that list. So it kept that. They have 6 of those veteran players, a couple new ones. They didn't make it so they have unlimited IR returns, but they made it 8. So that's a lot more flexibility than the 3 that there was previously. I think that's a smart stretch. They also changed it that instead of 3 games, now you have to wait 4 games to return from IR. So again, a little bit of a shift. Before there were only 3 players that could return, but they could return after 3 games. Then temporarily they did unlimited. Now they're going to 8 times they could do it, but it can be around spot on. This is fantastic. I'm going to go read the CBA again.
For those listening on the podcast, our good friend Ron Beck saying Greg is nerding out right now and he's in his glory. He for sure is. He's going to print this out and get a highlighter out and start reading through this stuff for sure.
I've already read through the amended part of the CBA once tonight. It was great. Yeah. So they did shift that part. You can have it with 4 games in between. So that'll come into play whenever a guy goes out. He will miss a full month, or it's 4 games, not 4 weeks. They're always specific about that. So if it's with the bye week, it would have to be the 5th week with the game that comes up. A player can do it twice, but they would have to miss both times, and they would count as 2 of the 8 if they went out, came back, and went out and came back. So for a team as deep as the Bills, this does help a little bit because we want to stash as many times as possible. With the talent that we have, the close calls we're going to have on cut downs, it's nice to be able to have that option to be able to keep guys there. So not some huge breaking news, but a good thing. I think it's rare that the owners in the CBA universally agree, and this is one that everybody's in favor of. So I was glad to see it.
Yeah, this is one of the few things that COVID brought us that is a good change, right, to the NFL. So this is a big win, in my opinion, for GMs, right? Like, the more opportunities you have, like you said, to stash. We know Brandon Beane is a great example of constantly tinkering with the bottom of that roster. And as this team continues to get good, one of the issues they ran into last year is trying to stash draft picks and losing out on some of this talent that you have. And so when you have such a deep roster, more ability to stash different guys and to keep guys in your building is a better thing, right? And it gives you more flexibility with some of the injuries. I know Joe Biscaglia had pointed out something about, hey, keep an eye out with Trey White and some of the stuff going into the season. It gives you some of that flexibility early on in a season to stash a player on the IR and get him back pretty quickly. So any flexibility that you can give a GM in this competitive, any type of advantage you can give them. And I think it does benefit probably the better teams a little bit more here, the teams that are a little bit deeper. So, hey, this is another benefit of the Bills finally being good. The rules are also applying to the better teams.
Yeah, so good things all around. We'll talk about that more as the season goes, as we get into training camp.
You're going to have to talk about that so much this year when there's practice squad stuff. And, the new rules are, you're going to have to explain it over and over.
It's going to be great.
Again.
It's going to be so fun. I'll take out my highlighted copies and show everybody where it was. So the next stop is the easiest discussion we're going to have this offseason. It's our quarterback position preview. Quarterback is honestly, I think that maybe there's a run for it with safety, but quarterback's the simplest position on the roster. There's no ambiguity. There's no guesswork. There's no wondering who's going to be in what spot. I would bet substantial amounts of money that Josh Allen is the starting quarterback, Case Keenum is the backup quarterback on the roster, and Matt Barkley is the quarterback 3 from the practice squad. Yeah. And is there any mystery beyond that, Aaron?
If not, we're screwed.
Something terrible happened. Yeah, something horrible happened.
Everything's I'm gonna have a tough time getting on here and doing the show. This is what we've all waited for 20 years of our lives, is to have this position all settled so that when you're going into the off season, the only question you're asking is, how is it going to improve from the year before, right? Like, Josh Allen over the last 2 years has put together back-to-back seasons of completely elite NFL caliber quarterbacking. So there's no reason to think that even a regression would still be top 10 NFL QB play, right? And I think when you look around what they've done here in this offseason, I think that there's a good chance that maybe the numbers for Josh Allen won't improve. I think we talked about this a little bit last year, that he could take a step forward without the numbers necessarily moving and being bigger yards, bigger touchdowns. Like, I think those numbers are relatively going to stay the same, but I think you're going to see a more effective Josh Allen with improved Aaron Kromer being in this building, and having Roger Saffold and Ryan Bates, who was playing good Rick Bates, who was playing good at the end of the year, and solidifying that offensive line. I think that could be something that allows for a more effective, efficient Josh Allen. I said it a lot here over the course of the year. People talked about, hey, the Bills' offensive line is playing pretty well, but Josh Allen a number of times bailed this offensive line out a year ago, where it got to the point around Christmas time where I said, those guys need to buy Josh Allen. Again, they need to chip in and get him something. We need to stop seeing that.
The ratio that always got me was the stat that showed number of pressures versus number of sacks. So you could see that ratio. Josh was not only number 1 in the NFL, it was by a significant amount. He was at only 5%. It was 4.8% of the pressures turned into sacks. Yeah. Most quarterbacks are between 10 and 15. Some are 20%. Mm-hmm. And Josh was way lower than everybody else. So
and that's what makes him a little bit special, right?
Sure.
That's always going to be there, but we don't want to have to rely on him getting out of sacks. And there was another, I didn't have a ton of time to pull up a ton of notes for this show, but there's another stat about who pressures are on. And a lot of it can be on the quarterback. When you look around the league, a lot of the times it falls on the quarterback. It wasn't the case in Buffalo. A lot of the times it was on the offensive line, especially in that interior offensive line. So if we solidify that, we saw what happened when that offensive line started playing better towards the end of the year. I'm expecting it to continue to improve with the addition of Saffold, the bringing in Aaron Kromer. that alone could allow for a better Josh Allen. And then I think you add in a better running game, a more effective running game, better screen game, getting a running back that can catch it. Two options of either Duke Johnson or James Cook, whoever wins that roster spot, being able to have that dump off guy that can get some yak for you. And that we know Josh Allen's working on that, trying to get guys open for yak.
Ball placement, timing.
Yeah, Greg, this is a conversation you and I have had offline a ton of times because the conversation around yak turned into, hey, the Bills aren't getting it. Where does it come from? And then people started looking for this thing called yak guys, which I don't know that I believe in it. Like, I think there's some guys that have good run after catch ability, and if you get them the ball in the right area, that they can produce. But I don't believe in yak guys. I think it's more complex than that. I think it's very dependent on a quarterback. And if Josh Allen's working on that, the one thing I've learned about Josh Allen is when he's working on something in the summer, that is going to improve. So I'm expecting a huge leap there for him too, where he's getting the ball to guys, whether it's scheme, getting the ball to guys open in space with Dorsey trying to get that yak out of this team, or him improving that accuracy and getting the guys the ball in space. And I think that's going to make this offense click that much more.
Some of the stuff we'll go through on each of these position previews, I'm still going to reference for the quarterbacks, even though there's not a lot of mystery in what's out there. The Bills have 3 guys under contract for a total of $20.7 million for this year. That ranks 13th in the NFL. It's just under 10% of the cap for this year. That's obviously, pretty clean in the way that it's set up. Matt Barkley's on the veteran minimum around $920,000. Case Keenum's on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Josh Allen is technically in his 5th year option year. His extension technically kicks in next year. So he's only $16.3 million, but clearly starting next year will be the beginning of his 6-year, $258 million year. So next year, that number jumps to $39 million. $258 million is crazy.
Good for you, sir.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. For any family or friends who live down in the southern tier, whispers, I heard that Josh closed on a house at Chautauqua Institute on Chautauqua Lake, which is my backyard where I grew up. So bought himself a vacation house down there, because when you have $258 million coming, you might as well buy yourself a vacation home.
Absolutely, yeah. And that Matt Barkley contract, that's not a bad deal either, to just come play golf with Josh Allen.
Yeah, come
that's
be
what
Josh's
he's here
friend.
for, is just be Josh's buddy. Yeah, good for you, Matt.
And I actually looked to see, they did give him a $25,000 signing bonus, and I think guaranteed $100,000 of it. So
when
he
you
at
become
least
a GM,
gets that, and then
just give me a deal like that to come be your golf buddy.
Yeah, I'm ready. So obviously at quarterback, not a lot of mystery here. I think the transactions are pretty clean. The roster setup is pretty clean. I won't. One last little piece here. It did come up on, is in a vacuum, do I think Case Keenum is better than Mitch Trubisky? No, I don't. I don't think that he's better, but. And if I had the choice, if you told me I had a game tomorrow and I needed one of them, I might pick Trubisky, but it's super close. One area I am excited about is with the shift of Brian Daboll leaving and having the first-time play caller, Ken Dorsey, not first-time quarterback coach, but new to that role in the NFL, quarterback coach Joe Brady. I like the idea of having 34-year-old Case Keenum in the room, who's seen a ton of NFL defenses, knows how to build a game plan, knows how to pick out coverages. I like his role in there better than Mitch Trubisky. Sure. And if it comes down to it, I think it's like 51-49 of talent-wise. That, maybe Trubisky still has a little more upside to recapture some of that Chicago, but Case Keenum did exactly what we would want. Last year he came in for 2 games in Cleveland, played mistake-free football, threw for about 230 yards a game, won 2 games, was 2-0. That's what you want. And then I want him in the room with Josh the rest of the time. Anytime anyone plays that isn't Josh Allen, it's not a good thing. So I'd rather have the value the rest of the time, and a guy who still holds like virtually every college passing record and still is like a precise passing kind of gunslinger type. I like that idea of having him there. So some fans had been maybe a little concerned about, was it a downgrade or was it nothing's going to be the value we had of how cheap Trubisky's deal was last year. But Case Keenum at $3.5 million for what he plays in that quarterback room and what he can do when he comes in, I'm perfectly good with it. And I'm actually okay if this doesn't be a revolving door for a little bit and he comes back for a year or two after this. He's the exact kind of guy I'm good with.
Yeah, no, I think it is an upgrade. I'm not gonna lie.
I think that's a reasonable argument for sure.
Yeah, I think that I like Trubisky. I liked him as a backup QB. I think he was one of the best backup quarterback situations in the NFL last year. Lauren here.
I made the mistake of asking. We've been kicking around ideas. A lot of channels and a lot of people have like names for their fans. We haven't really found an obvious one. And then Lauren said, "I thought cover lovers might be a bit too much." I appreciate the creativity.
We might need to change our show though.
Yeah,
The cover lovers. Back to Keenum. So I like Trubisky. I think where the upside for Trubisky was athleticism, right? Like you still had the athleticism at the quarterback position where if you're going to have a backup in and things aren't going to go well, I think you can talk yourself into, at least if you have the athleticism, you can find some free yards, right? You can get some scrambles, get your way out of a situation where I don't think Keenum has that type of athleticism, but he's seen more, in my opinion. He's come in these situations multiple times in his career. There is something different from being a career starter to being a backup role and having to come in mid-season, mid-game, something like that. Like it is a totally different mindset. He's proven that he can do that. He's seen a ton of defense. He's seen a lot of stuff. And Trubisky, let's be honest, like I was glad he was here last year. He was a very good teammate. Brandon Beane spoke wonders of him. He did everything he was supposed to do here, but the book is still out on who Mitch Trubisky is as a quarterback. Like they had team success in Chicago, but I don't know that it was because
ton of defense was
teams. the QB of that team. And if you talk to Bears fans, it was so up and down, and they had to really dumb down the playbook for him. He's not a quarterback that works through his progressions and can understand NFL defenses in the same way that I believe that a Case Keenum is. Keenum's much closer to a Ryan Fitzpatrick, in my opinion, of that. Hey, he's a really low-end NFL starter, but he's a really good backup, and that's exactly what I want for Josh Allen. So if I can't have Ryan Fitzpatrick and the persona and the personality that comes with Fitzpatrick, I'll happily take a Case Keenum.
Yeah, and the same thing you mentioned, Matt Barkley's a perfectly fine addition to the room. Not a guy that you want in playing in games, but perfectly fine QB3 on the bench or on the practice squad.
Matt Barkley's a great thing, and people don't care all that much about this, but I know Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane care a lot about this. The Barkleys are great at this onboarding process that the Bills are participating in right now. When they left, people said, like, hey, the Barkleys were always like the first family to reach out and welcome people to Buffalo and get people out doing things and get that
dinners,
hosting things and getting people together. Matt Barkley maybe knows his role more than anybody else on this roster of what he's supposed to be. He's a culture guy, right? Like be Josh's buddy, make Josh feel good, go golfing with him, and have parties with all the Bills players and stuff, and be that guy that's getting everyone together.
Sounds like a great life.
It's really an important role too, especially with the importance that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane put on a family atmosphere and everybody feeling comfortable, and they constantly talk about love. Like having a guy like that matters, and so he knows his role. He was brought back to fill that role.
So let's switch over now to a position, honestly, not with a ton more drama, but at least a little bit of debate to it. We have the tight end group. So in the tight end group right now, we technically have 5 guys under contract. We obviously have Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is 26. He's in the 4th year of his rookie deal.
I would like more contract.
Correct. So we'll talk about that in a moment. I think his projection, I was really hoping it would come in at like $8 million a year, and now I think it's going to be $10 or $12 million. It's getting kind of difficult to find a path. I hope it comes in under
the
it.
The Njoku contract's going to be
there was quite a few of those that actually came up. There was like, God, how are we going to avoid that number when they get that much money? OJ Howard here on a 1-year, $2.875 million deal. He's got some incentives that could go higher, and they had a little bit of some void years that stretched out a little bit into future years, but he's 28. He's more so just can he stay healthy? He's looked good when he's played, struggled to stay healthy. Obviously the Bills have had great facilities to be able to manage and do that. Those two are the roster locks. They're obviously going to be here. They're going to be the starting tight end and the number 2 tight end. They're going to be game day actives every single week. I don't think there's a ton of mystery there. But then where there is a little bit, you come into Tommy Sweeney, who's been on the roster here for a bit, a sneaky 27. I don't know that I would have guessed that, but a sneaky 27. Also in his 4th year in the setup, because he came in the same year as Dawson Knox. Quentin Morris, who was a UDFA last year, but a UDFA that hung on to the practice squad all year.
On that Sweeney, so he applies with the veteran practice squad?
He would
into a fourth year?
It's after once you've accrued 4 years.
Gotcha. So he does not apply to that.
He's about to accrue his 4th year, and I think he was on the roster the whole time for the other 3. So I think that he's about to accrue his 4th year, but he would not be a veteran. He'd be one of the 10 younger players. And then this year's UDFA is Jalen Weidermeyer out of Texas A&M, which obviously we had Damon Talbot on a couple weeks ago, and he was a huge fan of. So let's start with Dawson Knox. Obviously, huge season last year, real big improvement in his catch rate.
Myself on the back for that one.
You were way ahead of that than as far as I was. And I jokingly,
to be fair, Zach Ertz had a really good season.
Yeah. So I jokingly take crap for it when realistically I was just saying, hey, I wanted Zach Ertz or another tight end to upgrade Tommy Sweeney because I wanted a second tight end, and then I wanted insurance in case Dawson Knox wasn't going to take a step forward because he hadn't yet. And now it's great that he did. I mean, I'm really happy that he did. I still wouldn't have minded having another guy. We had games last year where we literally dressed one tight end because we didn't have anybody else to be able to get into it. So, but Dawson Knox season, 49 catches, 587 yards, 9 touchdowns was really big, but improved in catch rate, dropped his drop percentage, and really flashed in the playoffs as well. Really stepped forward as a blocker. So overall, we have to feel really good with him as a tight end 1, I think.
Yeah, no, I think he's clearly a tight end 1. I think this year for Dawson Knox is, can you replicate the type of production that you had a year ago? I think he can. I think, and if anything, I think that the Bills need to make him more of a focal point. I think he really is target 3 behind Diggs and Davis. I think it's got to be maybe a focal point to the point where he's sort of on par with Davis, in my opinion, of how you're targeting. I'd like to see him up in the 80s, 90s in targets at the end of the year, up with some of the more elite tight ends, and to see what type of production that he can get if you're targeting him with the same type of targets that some of the top 10 tight ends would get. I'd love to see where he stacks to those guys if targeted in the same way. So I think he's clearly there as the number 1 tight end. The problem is going to be is, can they get this guy extended? Because this is all fun and great for the 2022 season that this is your number 1 tight end. But if you can't get him on a reasonable extension, hopefully before he goes into a season that he blows up with, say, 85, 90 targets and pushing close to 1,000 yards. If he puts up another double-digit touchdown season, like that contract could get real out of hand real fast for the Bills, to where the point where either they're going to lose somewhere else to sneak a contract in for him, or he's going to price himself out of Buffalo, which would be a terrible thing to have invested that much time for him to bloom a little late and get him out. So I'd love to see something get done ahead of time, because I do think the addition of OJ Howard, even if it's just an addition of a decoy on the field and the type of things that they can do to stress an offense, is going to improve Dawson Knox's game. Again, all this other stuff that we're talking about, that the efficiencies of Josh Allen improving, I think will also improve Dawson Knox's game. Dawson Knox was one of the best. We talked a lot about yards after catch this offseason. Dawson Knox is one of the best Bills in yards after catch, and one of the best guys to target for yards after catch. If Allen's improving that, and Knox has already proven to be a guy that can do that, I can only see his production and value going up. So I would love to get a deal done here with Dawson Knox prior to the season starting, because I do see him blown up. And if he has another season similar like he had last year, I think people are going to start talking about this guy as, is he a top 5 tight end and a young tight end in the NFL? Because back-to-back seasons like that, Greg, I think you've got to start having that conversation. Well,
and I mean, Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle are all into their early 30s. Yeah. There's not a lot of time left on that time frame. And this year we saw Will Dissly and CJ Uzoma both signed 3-year, $24 million deals at $8 million a year. Dawson Knox is better than both of them. Evan Ingram got $9 million from the Jaguars. He's better than them. And then the guys that he'd be in the range of, a Dalton Schultz with Dallas, Mike Gesicki with Miami.
I think he's close with Gesicki there. I think that's a good one. Yeah.
David Njoku was the messy one, but all 4 of those guys got the franchise tag, which last year was $10.9 million. Well, next year it's 12.5.
Don't want to do that.
So if the Bills franchise tag Dawson Knox is 12.5 million. So Zach Ertz deal that was 3 years, 31.6 million, like 10.5 million a year. That's kind of my target right now. If we can get that get a 3-year, $31.5 million deal and lock him in for $10.5 million a year, I'd be perfectly good with that. You can structure it to spread some of that out, so it looks like a 5 or 6 year deal, and spread some of that over time, because tight ends honestly age pretty well. You're good signing, so that I would even sign Dawson Knox to a 6-year deal and not feel that uncomfortable with it, just
especially with as good of a blocker as he is. Because
Yes.
even if he starts to lose some of this athleticism, I think that you would gain that veteran experience, but you can't really take away that blocking ability. Like you either are learning and progressing at that, or you don't have it at all. So I think that he will age out well. I would be comfortable giving him that type of 6-year deal.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes, but I do think that's the range we're looking at, is probably between $10 and $11 million.
Now with Howard, is this best case scenario for Howard is to have a 40 target season, 600 yard production, and he goes off somewhere else and gets a big contract? Is that sort of what we're hoping? Is that the best case scenario we get out of OJ Howard?
It is one of those spots where it's interesting to say that you might not want him to be in a position where we can afford him next year, because if we can afford him, he probably did do that well, and if he does really well, we probably can't afford him. So it is
it gets into comp bingo.
Yeah, now it's some year we're gonna stop spending gobs of money and signing 13 new free agents.
I hope not.
It hasn't happened yet. Brandon Beane's done it. 13 is the lowest he's ever done.
I don't want a 3rd round comp pick. I want Von Miller's, baby.
Yeah. Give me Taquan Jones and Tim Settle, and I'm like, oh yeah, keep signing people. That's fine. So honestly, the hard part is we don't have any frame of reference of what this offense could look like with the second tight end. We've had Lee Smiths and Tommy Sweeney's and guys like that we just haven't had a second actual receiving threat. And even early on, Dawson Knox was kind of the second guy.
Tyler Croft was never fully healthy.
Yeah, like we just haven't had stretches where we had 2 competent, healthy tight ends that were a threat. We know Aaron Cromer loves to use 2 tight end sets in his zone running scheme. We know it certainly seems like Ken Dorsey's open to that and interested in it, so I'm excited to see it. But, I would be kind of surprised. 40 targets would be a lot. 40 targets would be at the high end, in my opinion. I think you'll see him, contributing blocking. I think 30 to 40 targets is probably the range that if we have him there, just as a frame of reference.
Best case scenario. Right?
Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie had 26 targets last year on the season. So Dawson Knox had 71. So that's, and Emmanuel Sanders had 72. Cole Beasley had 112. So there is, even with a healthy increase for Gabe Davis,
there's some on the table. There's some meat on the bone here.
I don't think there's any chance Jamison Crowder gets the 112 that Beasley got. I think that he could get 80 or 90 targets, but I do think he gives up 20 or 30 of the ones Beasley had. And then even with Gabe Davis taking a chunk more, that 20 or 30 given up plus the Emmanuel Sanders 72, there's like 100
throwing more.
Well, yeah, that's always more fun too. There's numbers out there, and I think that some combination of OJ Howard, Khalil Shakur, and maybe a little Isaiah McKenzie, we'll see, will grab them. We'll see where it goes from there. But I think OJ Howard, I think you're spot on in that, we probably don't want to have him back, because that means he probably didn't do well enough that we could afford him. But I do think that that's his range as he comes here, looks good, established himself. The biggest question for him is staying on the field, because he's had 2 seasons where he played 14 games, but then a season with 8 games, 1 game, or sorry, 8 starts, so 10 games, 4 games. Last year he played all 17. So we want to hope that last year was the driving force here, and that he can replicate that and just play every week. But that's really where the question is. If he can stay on the field for 17 games, I think he can contribute and get himself a contract the next year.
Yeah. Our good friend Ron, again, with a good one here. He says, best case for Howard is a good season, wants to stay in Buffalo, and seems like it could happen the way that Howard has talked since signing with us. One thing, players are always going to talk really highly of the team that they're with when they sign. So there's some of that. OJ Howard, if he plays well enough to get a contract, he's gonna go get himself a contract. He hasn't
gotten a big one yet.
He hasn't gotten the big one yet. He was stuck behind sort of a log jam in Tampa.
Right when they drafted him, they signed Cameron Brate, and then they went and got Gronk.
They went and got Gronk. He's been stuck behind there. Arians didn't seem to really favor him that much. He had some injury problem. So the career hasn't gone the way he wants. This is his opportunity with Buffalo to resurrect that career and cash in, because soon he's going to age out of that spot where you can cash in as a tight end. So if he does play well enough, I can't see him taking a deal because he likes Buffalo and wants to continue to stay here. He's going to go get some money somewhere else, and good for him.
Yeah. God bless him. That's a great way to approach it. So then we get into the actual question here is, it actually came up earlier. I think Douglas Masters was asking about it here, or earlier on with, do we keep 3 tight ends? Historically, we have, but there's been moments where we only had 2 on the active roster, and a couple stretches last year where we only had 2 and 1 on the game day active list. So Tommy Sweeney has appeared in 16 games. He was on the active game day roster for 13 last year. Only got in a couple times and had the one stretch where Dawson Knox broke his hand, and he technically started for 3 games. Haven't seen a ton. He's only had 25 targets in his career over the 3 years, 17 catches. Now you bring in guys like a second year for Quentin Morris, who was last year's UDFA, and then this year's UDFA tight end Jalen Weidermeyer. So I'll ask first, do you think we keep 3 on the active roster, and how would you rank them in their likelihood of making it?
I do think we keep 3, and I think the third is Tommy Doyle. No.
Now he's trying out at guard. He
right?
can do all the things. He can be blocking tight end, tackle, and guard. He's versatile.
Everything. Utility knife. No, so I thought it was a little bit interesting how Josh Allen talked about Tommy Sweeney just being, he was saying sort of like he's in every room. Like he was in the QB room. He's in all these. Like I think he's another one of these guys that maybe fans don't really see it. We haven't seen the production. We don't know the type of player he is. I think we're frustrated that the development hasn't been.
I'm fans.
Yeah, no, I am too. Like I loved this idea of who he was when they got him, and like hey, they can develop him into that perfect. If he develops into what he thought he would be coming out of college, it's a perfect tight end 3, right? Yeah. And he just hasn't developed into that yet. But I do think the coaching staff is more in on Tommy Sweeney than necessarily the fan base is. I think he probably hits the DNA the way Josh was talking about him. And I think all that stuff matters, especially when we're talking about the end of the roster. These guys, even if they keep a tight end 3, this isn't going to be probably a game day active tight end 3 role most times. I think it's going to be a guy that in a bind, if OJ's out or something happens to Dawson Knox, they have that guy come in and be on that active roster. I don't think it's going to be a huge position for them. But then you take the production of a Jalen Weidermeyer, and it's hard to not get excited about a younger to reset the clock on that tight end 3. So it's going to be a nice battle, but I think Tommy Sweeney's got more in this race than maybe fans think, where when they brought in Weidermeyer, those highlights are fun. It's fun to talk about an undrafted free agent and want to root for that new toy to make the team. But I would just pump the brakes a little bit. That I think the coaching staff might be more in on Tommy Sweeney than we realize.
Well, and one I want to give a shout out, our man Chris Janke. He actually helped me do some of the CBA research on the pieces that were there for it. We'll talk about Reggie Gilliam next week when we come up with the running backs. We are going to count him as a fullback, but he does have the sneaky versatility that when they went with the games where there was one tight end with Dawson Knox, it's because they had Gilliam who could line up if they needed to be able to do that. So it's a great point by Chris here. I do think that there's a path where Tommy Sweeney is the tight end 3 this year, and Jalen Weidermeyer is the future tight end 3, and they just stash him on the practice squad, let Sweeney's contract expire, and then Weidermeyer is that guy next year.
Give him a full year to develop.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be either or, because I know there are, obviously Damon was very passionate about how ready Weidermeyer is, but tight end's a tough, slow developing position, even for high draft picks, let alone.
And he did go undrafted for a reason.
Even guys who test incredibly poorly and didn't get drafted, very few tight ends, period, are huge contributors and ready to play day one. So I think having that be the flexible spot there, and Ron has where my head is at. I do think the depth at some of the other positions could be the spot where they have to say, hey, just like we're going to have quarterback 3 on the practice squad, we're just going to have 2 tight ends on the practice squad, and if we need one, we'll bring them up then. and we'll just call them up. We can keep Weidemeyer, and we'll try to get Tommy Sweeney back on practice squad. But if we have both Weidemeyer and Quentin Morris and we need something, we'll just call one of them up when we need it, but they can be tight end 3 from the practice squad.
Sure.
I don't know that that's the most likely, but I think it's absolutely in play.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to shake itself out here this summer to see, if anyone steps up at this position. Because if the levels that we don't know who Weidemeyer is going to be in the NFL, right? But we have an idea of who Tommy Sweeney is so far and who Quentin Morris is so far. If there's nothing changes, those are practice squad guys all day long, and that's an easy one. But if anyone takes a good step here forward, or Weidemeyer comes in and he's who the film showed him to be and not the testing showed him to be, then you start to get into a hard conversation of like, well, shoot, like you might not be able to practice squad a guy if he's showing out all summer long. And I know we talk about this every year that people are worried when you cut someone, are we going to be able to get him back on the practice squad? Usually the case is you can get him on the practice squad again. But if a guy's playing really well, it's there's also a chance. We saw a couple of guys not make it off the Bills practice squad this year and get picked up by other teams. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, Amy's awesome. She's here for us every week, and we appreciate her very much.
Appreciate you.
So, at tight end, you will have some positions here where we have some real, debate on who is going to make it and who's in each of the spots.
Well here,
both quarterback is super easy. Tight end is fairly easy in that Knox and Howard are roster locks. And then we think it's 75-80% that we keep a tight end 3.
Sure.
And we think it's probably likely Sweeney, but Weidemeyer or Morris could do it, or it could be none of them, and we'll see how that plays out over camp. And honestly, I don't know that it makes a huge difference which one it is.
No.
Because,
and if they're getting targets, same thing as the problems where,
wrong.
if we're not talking about Josh Allen, something's wrong. If we're not talking about Dawson Knox or O.J. Howard, something's gone very wrong at that position.
Yeah. So ultimately, this is what you guys can expect here through this offseason. I always try to tell people, if you have people in your life that are excited hearing about the Bills but haven't been like crazy passionate fans, haven't been like totally dialed into everything going on, but they hear everybody else talking about it
on Twitter 24 hours a day.
Yeah, aren't on Twitter an obsessive amount of time. Please tell them about these shows. This is a great way to get to know the team, to understand who's going to be on the roster this year, to know what to expect, to be able to talk through and kind of get caught up on what this team has and why people are so excited about it and why everyone is calling them a Super Bowl favorite and Josh Allen's an MVP favorite and all those different things. This is a great way to get caught up on that. So please help us, share the news, like, subscribe, rate, review, everything that's there, wherever you're listening to this. That's how we are able to share more and do more for you guys and be able to bring you more content and more information. So help us out. Tell somebody about it, that your neighbor, that you work with, that you see at the car line with kids, whatever it might be. Let somebody know about us.
Yeah, I'm always telling you, anytime I see people around, I'm like, hey, you a Bills fan? Hey, you listen to podcasts? And that's it. People love talking about that stuff. What I will say, that my favorite thing about this content, so this time of year is tough, right, as a content creator, to get through this stretch here where we talked about it a little offline. OTAs is a tough one for me because I'm just constantly pumping the brakes. Everyone wants to get excited about it's really it's onboarding, it's getting people ready for the scheme, stretching, a lot of stretching, stuff like that. So you're going to see me pumping the brakes on this.
Although they did say Von Miller was a very impressive stretcher, so good for his flexibility.
I'm trying to get to that Von Miller level because I'm not very impressive. It's a pretty ugly thing to watch me stretch. But what I will say about this type of content that we're doing here, this is one of the few times at the Cover One Buffalo podcast that you're going to get something that's an not evergreen piece of content, but something that lasts longer than a week. Normally our content, Greg, is week in and week out, and then it's no good. You've got all summer. So later in the summer, if you're talking to Bills fans too, and they want to catch up before training camp or whatever like that, we're going to have this whole series out there for them to be able to listen to and consume at their pace. They don't have to get into it this week. This is going to be something that sits out there, and it's going to be good content for you guys all summer long.
Yeah, so can't wait be able to check things out. Lauren telling her dad about the show. He didn't know what a podcast was. Yes. He probably has a smart TV. Put us up on the smart TV. He'll think we're a TV show.
Yeah. My dad.
He'll think we're like on ESPN.
My dad never listened to a podcast. When we went out to Vegas, he's like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I got a podcast. He's like, what the heck is that? Like, didn't get it. So I sent him the link, and he's like, holy cow, that's pretty cool. Like, I never knew what a podcast was. He's like, he's a Green Bay Packers fan. He's like, do they have Green Bay Packer podcasts? I said, yeah, buddy.
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah. So some good ones.
All of them.
You guys were awesome. The chat was fantastic tonight. We appreciate you guys very, very much. We'll be here with you guys all summer long, bringing you guys everything that's going on. Maybe a week or two here or there are some scheduled things. We might not be every single
Summer's
week.
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, we'll be here for you every week, every Wednesday night, bringing you great content for all the position previews all the way up to training camp. This will take us the rest of the way through. So if little things like tonight happen where there was an actual news tidbit, we'll bring those to you and react to that. Otherwise, we'll keep along with our pace the rest of the time. So anything final for the people, Aaron?
Yeah, no, like I said, enjoy this time of year, enjoy this content that everybody's putting out. And I'm just excited. I'm really looking forward to training camp this year. There's a bunch of little battles towards the end of the roster that I'm just getting really excited to see how this whole thing's going to come together. So this positional breakdown of really digging into the bottoms, because we pretty much know across the board where your starters are going to be here, but it's the bottom of that roster. I think that's going to make the difference in 2022 for the Bills, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. So excited to get through these positions and dig our way into training camp.
Absolutely. So this has been a lot of fun. We appreciate you guys. On behalf of Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out. Just for Amy, go Bills.
Go Bills.